Guess, and no public comment, so moving down to a motion for approval of the minutes of February 27th, 2025. May I have a motion for that?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Brandon?
Yes.
Mr. Herford?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahala?
Yes.
Mr. Rivera?
I'm gonna abstain because I wasn't here.
Okay. Mr. Shelton?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Washburger?
Yes.
Mrs. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams? Motion
Yes.
carries.
Okay, Mr. Solicitor, do we have any action items in the executive session?
Mr. Chairman, first I'll note for the record that the pre-meeting commenced at 11 o'clock today. We were given an informational briefing on some of our obligations as board members. And additionally, there was an executive session portion of the pre-meeting, and that dealt with the Pennsylvania Supreme Court case. Full argument scheduled for May 14th. We talked about the federal bankruptcy case and the different issues arising there. But there were no action items for an executive session, and that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Solicitor. Next is item 8, which is the Chief Financial Officer's report. Item 8A is a request to approve expenses by function report. May I have a motion for that?
So moved. Second.
Mr. Brandon?
Yes.
Mr. Herford?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahala?
Yes.
Mr. Rivera?
Yes.
Mr. Shelton?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Washburger?
Yes.
Mrs. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item, the Director's Engineering Report. There are a number of items there. May I have a motion for item 8A, which is contract 25-003, furnishing outside maintenance services for admin and distribution facilities through CoStars.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Just to point that, you said 8A, it's 9A.
Sorry, 9A, thank you.
Mr. Brandon?
Yes.
Mr. Herford?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahala?
Yes.
Mr. Rivera?
Yes.
Mr. Shelton?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Washburger?
Yes.
Mrs. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to item 9B, request to approve option year acceptance for several contracts, 23-001, which is furnishing paving services, 23-002, furnishing HVAC and plumbing services, 23-019, furnishing construction trade services, contract 24-004, performance of water distribution construction work, and lastly 24-006, furnishing and delivery of quarry materials. May I have a motion for item 9B?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Brandon?
Yes.
Mr. Herford?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahala?
Yes.
Mr. Rivera?
Yes.
Mr. Shelton?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Washburger?
Yes.
Mrs. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And the next item 9C, request to approve proposal from JMT Technology Group for GIS consulting services not to exceed $60,450. We have a motion for item 9C.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Brandon?
Yes.
Mr. Herford?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahala?
Yes.
Mr. Rivera?
Yes.
Mr. Shelton?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Washburger?
Yes.
Mrs. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries.
For the next two items, items 9D and E, are both for engineering services. One is to Schnabel Engineering for on-call dam engineering services not to exceed $44,000. That is the correct number, right? And item 9E for Catania Engineering for 2025 on-call engineering services not to exceed $100,000. May I have a motion for items 9D and
So
E?
moved.
Second.
Mr. Brandon?
Yes.
Mr. Herford?
Yes.
Mrs. Mahala?
Yes.
Mr. Rivera?
Yes.
Mr. Shelton?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Washburger?
Yes.
Mrs. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Our team has been very active over the last few years in submitting for grants, and Item 9F is yet another one, so this is a request to adopt the resolutions and approve submission of grant application for Pennsylvania's local share account grant program. Resolutions and applications are subject to the solicitor's and executive manager's review and approval as to the form and content. May I have a motion for item 9F?
So moved. Second.
Mr. Brandon.
Yes.
Mr. Herford.
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalik.
Yes.
Mr. Rivera.
Yes.
Mr. Shelton.
Yes.
Mrs. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Washburger.
Yes.
Mrs. Whitaker.
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
The next item, 10, this is a number of requests for purchase of various trucks. Item 10A, 10B, and 10C are for dump trucks. The first one, item 10A, is a Peterbilt truck for $167,141 through Sourcewell. Item B is, 10B is a Ford F-450 dump truck, $92,873.94 through CoStars. Item 10C is a Ford F-350 dump truck for $113,423.44 through CoStar. We have a motion for items 10A, B, and C.
And so moved.
Second.
Mr. Brandon.
Yes.
Mr. Herford.
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalik.
Yes.
Mr. Rivera.
Yes.
Mr. Shelton.
Yes.
Mrs. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Washburger.
Yes.
Mrs. Whitaker.
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
The final item, 10B, is a request to approve renewal of software licensing and support subscription for VMware via Araya for $30,583.36. We have a motion for 10B.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Brandon.
Yes.
Mr. Herford.
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalik.
Yes.
Mr. Rivera.
Yes.
Mr. Shelton.
Yes.
Mrs. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Washburger.
Yes.
Mrs. Whitaker.
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Item 11 is new business. Any new business? Anybody? Hearing none. Any old business? Okay, if there's no public comment, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
All right.